Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and NFL season is near. Logan, I can freaking smell it and I can freaking taste it. So here we are today with our top 10 quarterback rankings. This is going to be highly contentious no matter what, because honestly, I don't know if I see a bigger range in terms of lists that people put together than you do when it comes to ranking quarterbacks. And part of that is probably because the criteria from person to person varies just so much. So before we even get into this top 10 list, which I'm sure is going to make some people very mad no matter what, why don't you lay out your criteria that you're ranking by, Logan?
Well, first, I think you hit on a very important point there. One, I think that you can have so many different quarterbacks, like especially in these like 7 to 10 spots where I don't even blame people because I think the quarterback position is more talented than it's ever been before. Like, that's what I want to start out with is we have never seen quarterbacks this good and this deep in the NFL before. Like, if you think back to, I always think when I grew up because I'm perpetually stuck in the year 2008, but
sure,
you think about some of the starting quarterbacks that are around the league or that were even being considered for starting jobs at that point, and like
Brian St. Pierre is at the top of the list.
Like, you know, you've got the Joey Harrington still fighting for starting spots and stuff like that, and Trent Dilfer's hanging along, and Jeff Garcia's. And I'm not saying that, you know, quarterbacks are always fighting for their jobs, but it's never been deeper. Like, the 20th guy in the league today
100%.
is arguably more talented than a guy that would have been top 10 back then. Like, it really is just that simple. It's just that true. And so we've never had – the quarterback position has never been more talented than it is today in the NFL today. I think it's never been deeper and it's never been more talented at the top. And so I legitimately think that there are probably, this is stretching it a little bit, but like 16 to 18 guys that you could argue as top 10 quarterbacks. Legitimately, and like, no, they're not all top 10 QBs, but I would hear an argument out for these guys. And so off the top, I know that we always piss people off with our lists, but I have a feeling that we might rub a little salt in the wound today. So my criteria, I really value offensive engines. That is my biggest, like, if I had to sum it up with like 2 words, it is your ability to elevate your own situation and to single-handedly propel your offense to success. That it means moving the ball consistently. That means scoring points. That means converting third downs at a really high level. That means being good in the red zone. That's my criteria, and it's weird because I feel like I have a fundamental difference between some of our basketball lists and the quarterback position. Like some of our basketball lists, I will prefer a player's ability to impact winning at the highest level to raise a ceiling. Here it's a little bit different where I am going to take the context of your team situation, and I feel like if you do a better job of elevating bad supporting cast, I may value that more than you winning with an elite supporting cast. That's kind of the big thing about the quarterback position nowadays. I'm going to get into the specific dynamics of a few QBs like that when we get to our honorable mentions, but that's what I'd say my criteria is.
I also think the cross-sport comparison with basketball, I mean, they're so dramatically different, and especially just the reality of football being a sport where there are 2 sides of the ball, one of which any offensive player is entirely uninvolved, that there are 10 other starters, that there are multiple other position groups, and coaching is so impactful. Like, there are just so many more factors that come into play when you're talking about the context than there are in basketball. So I am judging players in a vacuum. That is my fundamental criteria for this list. Like you said, I do value the ability to create pretty highly, the ability to elevate others, if that's with a physical trait like arm strength, if that's with your ability to move and create out of structure on the back of your mobility. I do think those are things that translate across situations, but the ability to deal with pressure is hugely important to me. The ability to execute situationally is very important to me. And like we're talking about, there's just so many moving parts that I think more so than any other sport, and it's honestly not even close, numbers can lie in football, and numbers can be greatly misleading about a player's individual value and impact because they might be in the most stacked offensive situation ever. They might be in the worst offensive situation ever. They might be in a scheme where they throw the ball a ton. They might be in a scheme where they don't throw the ball much. Like, there's just so many things that I think largely you have to try to judge these players, and I know this sounds crazy and radical, purely based on how good you think they are at football. If you dropped them into a league average situation, if you put them in another quarterback situation, who do you think would be better, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I think there is a winning bias.
Yep.
I think there's maybe
100%.
a reputational factor that will make some people mad about my placement of certain players on my list. But I also think you're totally right about the depth at the position and the number of guys who you could credibly make an argument for, which is why I think it's always so interesting when people talk about like there being a quarterback crisis of some kind in the NFL today. I just think the reality, if you look throughout the entire history of the sport, is never, ever will you have 32 quality starting quarterbacks. It's just not possible. It's never been attained. We are closer to that today than we've ever been before. There are fewer teams that are going into week one with Trent Edwards or Sean Hill or John Kitna or all these different guys as their starter. I understand some people talk about the young guys being thrown into the fire maybe too soon, and that's the one area where you could see some guys who aren't really developed starting in today's NFL, but I think overall the number of guys who are legitimate high-quality starters is greater than ever before. So, with that being said, Logan, who are your toughest cuts? Who are your honorable mentions?
Last thing I want to mention on the criteria point, you hit on it very briefly, but I don't care about players like what they're not responsible for. I don't really winning is very, very important, and I know a lot of people just put winning under the quarterback's belt. Like if you win games, it's all on the quarterback. I think there's a fundamental misattribution error. Carson, you did a excellent video on that a while back with the Jalen Hurts dynamic and stuff like that. But for me, winning is very, very important, and if like the quarterback in a specific game had an opportunity to win and he came through, sure, I will add that notch on his belt, but it's like I'm not going to criticize a guy because his defense ranks last in the league and he didn't win enough games or something like that. Because I think, like you said, dude, there's so many moving parts. There's so many players that are responsible, and you have to try your best to zero in on the quarterback and his individual impact on the game. Because there's going to be 22 guys that play. There are 53 to 54 guys on a roster. Like, there's an entire coaching staff.
Yeah.
It is, in my opinion, the hardest sport to try to measure individual impact.
Yeah, I agree.
And so,
but nevertheless, I do think that it's possible, and I do think that we both have the right criteria in my eyes, which is to judge players in a vacuum, because if you do overvalue winning, if you do overvalue situation and say, oh, these are the numbers, these are the results, this guy's that good, that's how you wind up with Jimmy G in top 5 talks, right? Because, yeah, the Niners are great offenses, and yeah, his efficiency numbers are really good, and they win a lot of games. Because they're an unbelievable organization with an unbelievable system, with unbelievable skill position talent around him. And then turns out you drop in Mr. Irrelevant, and that guy's actually better. And it turns out you put Jimmy G in a different situation, and he's not even a starting quarterback. He's not even of that caliber. Just a year after he was putting up great efficiency numbers and leading out one of the best offenses in football. That's the power of an entire roster, an entire organization, and that's the impact that they can have on individual production and how these guys are perceived. So, glad that we got on our soapbox and got all that out of the way, because I do think that context will frame our list. Who are your toughest cuts, Logan?
Yeah, you dropped Nick Mullins in there. He has the most yards through 5 games by a quarterback in NFL history, man.
But Shanahan's the problem, man. But they'll tell you Shanahan's the problem. Okay.
SMH my head. My toughest cut, and I think the guy that is omitted from my list that is going to piss the most people off is Jalen Hurts. And admittedly, he was the toughest cut off of my list. I do want to start by giving Jalen Hurts props. The one thing that I love, the two things that I love about Jalen Hurts more than anything, 3. I'll give him, we'll spread some love today, man.
Let's get him 4, because I don't know if aura and being good looking is on that list, but it should
Let's
be.
give him 4. You know, he's a very handsome man.
Yes.
I love Jalen Hurts. I love Jalen Hurts' composure. He never seems throttled by the gravity of the moment. We have seen him now in 2 Super Bowls where I think Jalen Hurts has really performed extremely well. In the playoffs, he seems really composed. Like, Jalen is a guy I really believe in as a leader and to keep his cool. And that is a really valuable trait, in my opinion, as a quarterback. Second, I love his ability as a short yardage quarterback and as a scrambler in the red zone. I think he can get a little bit overrated in terms of his ability is like an engine. Like, I think Lamar Jackson is in a tier of his own in quarterbacks, like in their mobility, right? Like, and I think Josh Allen is a better scrambler and like engine in terms of that regard because of his brute force and his ability. But as a short yardage runner, I really do value Hurts' ability to just get the ball in the end zone. If it is by way of a tush push, if it's him scrambling out of shotgun, out of like QB power or something like that, I really do value that. And I think he's a pretty good decision maker. I think he's improved a lot over 2 years ago to last season. But he's just a good passer. And he's a game manager, ultimately. And the thing that keeps him from being on my list is the boatload of talent that the Philadelphia Eagles have. I think they have the best offensive line in football. I think they have the best receiving room or top 2 receivers in the NFL. And AJ, maybe not. You could argue maybe the Bengals, but I think AJ Brown and Smitty are 2 of the best in the league. And then they've got a all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber defense. And you've said this a myriad of times, Carson, but that Eagles team is one of the most talented Super Bowl champions of all time, no doubt. And when it comes to Hurts, I think there is a major misattribution error that comes with winning a Super Bowl. And I don't want to take anything away from him because, again, I think he performed in the biggest stage. I think he did all he could do. I mean, they won the Super Bowl. You can't ask more from a quarterback. And I know that some people get frustrated with that. I know we already addressed this in criteria. I know it can be frustrating for some people because they go, well, you can only do so much, right? Like, what else do you want him to do? He won the Super Bowl. There are just other guys where I feel like their jobs are a lot harder because of their situations, and I think Jalen Hurts is in the most privileged situation of any quarterback in the NFL. So he was definitely my toughest cut. He's number 11 for me. I just think guys have tougher jobs, and I think you could drop a lot of quarterbacks in that situation, and they would thrive.
So I think that there's a lot to touch on there, and Hurts brings up one additional point that I want to mention with my criteria, which is that I really don't value playoff performance for an NFL list nearly as highly as I do for the NBA, just to make that cross-sport comparison again, because we do so much NBA stuff. But the reason is because they're so dramatically different. Like, when you get to playoff basketball, right, you are looking at a different sport. You are looking at a different level of physicality. You are looking at a different level of schematic dedication from your opponent, doing everything they can to expose your weaknesses, to force you to go away from your greatest strength. And also, on top of that, you are looking at a way bigger sample size. If you're in a playoff series, we're getting at least 4 games of you. We might see 25 games of you in a single playoff run. And there are specific traits and specific skill sets that we see year after year gain value in the playoffs compared to the regular season. And there are certain regular season traits that we see are more difficult to maintain their value in the playoffs because, again, the sport is just different. Football isn't like that, man. Football is played 100% every single week of the year in terms of schematic preparation, for which you have a full week. You don't stumble into a Wednesday game in Sacramento. Like, every week, the stakes are so incredibly high. Every game matters so much. Physicality is fully unleashed. I just don't see a difference between regular season and playoff football, at least not nearly at the level that you do with basketball. And then it comes down to the sample size point. I'm not going to overreact to one playoff game, just like I'm not going to wildly overreact to one regular season game. If you have a 17-game sample, or if you have a multiple year sample of somebody being one guy, a really great player, and then they have one bad playoff game, or if you have a sample of somebody being a solid regular season player for years, and then they have one great playoff game, like, those things just really don't move the needle for me as much as they probably do for other people. And I think over time, that is the right way to evaluate things, because the reality is, if you're solid in the regular season, and then you have one great game, you're just as likely to come back to your baseline the next year, maybe drop a little bit below it. So
to me, the two
I just think
QBs,
that's important to point out. Yeah,
it is. The 2 QBs I'd point to, it's like everybody looked at Justin Herbert differently because he lost one playoff game and overreacted to that. It would be like, and there's some low-hanging fruit right here. This is my guy. It would be like if you watch Daniel Jones win a playoff game against the Vikings and then you go, damn, that's a franchise quarterback. So I do think the sample size point is a really good one.
And that literally happened. I mean, there were people who were arguing that Daniel Jones was a top 10 quarterback after the 2022 season. And that's where, again, I think I just lean on the side of going with the sample size, going what I see from these guys over 17 weeks more so than going off of what I see from them in one game that has a really big spotlight on it and everybody's watching because it's a playoff game. So all that being said, I don't want to discredit Hurts playing really well in the Super Bowl and playing really well in the NFC title game. That is super important, super valuable. I just think there are certain people who will overvalue that, who will ignore a lot of the mediocrity that came before that, and also maybe just pencil in, okay, great, every single time that Jalen Hurts gets to a big game, he's going to be awesome. And I just don't think you can guarantee that based off the small sample size that we do have of him playing really well in some of those spots. And when I do look at the 17 games, I do have some issues with Hurts that keep him just out of my top 10 as well. He's also probably my toughest cut, definitely one of my toughest cuts, but there are some issues in terms of his ability to process the game quickly. He holds onto the ball for the longest time in the NFL, can take too long to make decisions, can struggle with timing. I think very much interrelated with that, you see he has an obscenely high sack rate for playing behind one of the best offensive lines in football. That's another thing that I value, your ability to deal with pressure, as I mentioned, and specifically mitigate sack damage. That's so important. That can be so destructive to an offense. And he's got a 9.5% sack rate with that elite offensive line in front of him. I think his pocket presence can be shaky. Overall, very mediocre versus pressure, 19th in EPA. So I just think you have to understand that reality, and also the fact that, like, for the whole season, the only complaint about this Eagles team that was in every other way an absolute juggernaut was their quarterback play. And I guess you could frame it as their overall passing attack, but they had a top 3 receiving duo in football and an elite pass protecting O-line. So it was the limitations of Jalen Hurts. It was, again, some of the decision-making inconsistencies. And I do want to be clear, when I talk about decision-making, I want to give Hurts credit for really cutting down on the turnovers this past year, because that was a big improvement he made. And that's honestly what gives him the most compelling case for being in the top 10, in my opinion, because 2023, he really struggled with the turnovers. This past year, especially down the stretch, he played very mistake-free football. And that's pretty much what the Eagles asked of him, right? Like, don't fuck this up for us. Let's dominate the possession game. I also thought he did a nice job of identifying things pre-snap, but it's really managing the game, not taking those costly turnovers. He was really good at that. When I talk about the decision-making and where I'm critical of that, it is with taking too long to make reads, taking sacks, the timing being off. And this is a team that was 29th in passing yards. They were pretty average in terms of net passing yards per attempt. So that's where I land with Hurts. I think he is accurate. I think he's got a pretty good arm. I think that he is really good in short yardage situations. As you mentioned, one of the best. And he did play really well in the last 2 games of the playoffs. I'm just not moved by that 2-game playoff stretch like other people are. And I'm not moved by winning a Super Bowl as much as some other people are when you do it with the most stacked roster that we've seen in the last 2 decades. And when you play at the level that Hurts did over the entire season, which is not an elite quarterback level.
Do you think I think they're probably the best Super Bowl winning team top to bottom since like the 90s Cowboys.
I don't think that's unreasonable to say at all. I think you put them up there with the 90s Cowboys, with the 80s Niners as like the most talented rosters that we've ever seen.
Yeah, and obviously it's important because people react to that. You know, those teams are dynasties and they won, multiple championships, but it's like that is the caliber of team. Like if we were just looking at position groups and roster spots, they're definitely there, like one of the most talented ever.
It's absolutely ridiculous. They had a top 3 offensive line, top 3 wide receiver duo, all-time great running back, best defense in football, ridiculously stacked up front with an all-pro linebacker, with a great dramatically improved secondary. Like, you put all that together, and there's just not a more fortunate quarterback situationally in football. So I know that this is going to be controversial, but I look at the guy who I have in my number 10 spot. I just don't think if you drop Jalen Hurts in his situation, he could do what that guy did over 17 games. He could overcome. He could deal with that level of pressure. He could just demonstrate the level of audacity and arm talent consistently that guy did and make some of those high leverage throws, read the game at that level. So that's where I land on him being just outside my top 10. I understand people are going to say he won the Super Bowl, but like there was a 3-year stretch where Trent Dilfer and Brad Johnson won the Super Bowl. And even the guy in between them, Tom Brady, it was his first year. He had 19 total touchdowns throughout the whole season, including the playoffs. Like, this is the thing with football, man. When you have an incredible roster, when you have an incredible organization, and the Eagles absolutely have that, you just don't always have to have a top-of-the-line quarterback. Like the winning bias of, okay, they won, so now we have to elevate everybody. That's not actually how it works. When you're great everywhere else, you can win with just a good, not great quarterback. And that's what Jalen Hurts is to me. He's good, not great, and he's just off my list. That's going to be the most controversial thing today, I'm sure. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Logan, or any other honorable mentions you want to shout out?
Not about Hurts. I do have some other names written down that I want to get to pretty quickly through here. Another important part of my criteria that I want to add to is I really value your ability. Now, this doesn't obviously apply to everybody across the spectrum. I do value your dual threat ability, your ability to affect the game in multiple ways. Now, again, if you were an exceptional pocket passer, I have you on my list. That is still an invaluable skill to have, but you were talking about teams that could inflate guys' numbers. I think a lot of people would have Jared Goff here with what he's done over the past few seasons, and I think Goff is great in the pocket. I think he is great arm talent, really good at throwing with anticipation and being on time. Like, you watch Lions games, and he's a guy that if like you had a great offensive system and you want him to execute, Goff is a guy that can do that at a very, very high level. When it comes to those high leverage situations where you need him to create out of the pocket and go above and beyond, that is where I think you see some of his limitations. And I do think you talk about those high stakes environments, Goff still kind of has that bozo gene a little bit where I think it rears its ugly head and he's due for a turnover or something. Goff is very good. I leave him off my list a little bit. You might have this guy on your list. I do want to give an honorable mention to Dak Prescott. I do not have him on my list. I do think Dak's going to have a great year this year, though. I think you give him CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I don't know, man. Dak might throw for 5 bands this year. Like, that is a scary receiving duo. My anti-Cowboys bias keeps him from my list. And then I do leave Jordan Love off of my list. He was another one of my toughest cuts. Love is audacious. And I don't really have a ton of gripes about Love's game. The only gripes I would have are consistency, and then I think there are just guys that are older than him that have a little more polish that I trust and believe in some of my spots that are like my 10 and 9 spots. So those were my toughest cuts.
Okay, interesting. There's a couple guys you mentioned who maybe will come up for me a little bit later, but I do want to shout out Goff because I do think he's really good, man. And there are so many instances where in structure he executes so well and he has the raw arm talent. He can put zip on that ball and he can make some high-level throws. It's just when it comes to playing out of structure, he is the most limited guy who we will talk about today. Absolutely, in terms of mobility, which is something that I value. And then there are times where the decision-making just really crumbles for him and the mistakes feel like they come in waves and they compound where 5-6 weeks of mistake-free football and you're like, oh my God, this Jared Goff is incredible. And then the bozo gene kicks in and it bites you all at once and you've got 3 picks in a playoff game. And I think that he's still very close to this list for me, but I think you've seen the same things bite him a couple too many times to have him here. And really it's that lack of mobility and understanding, again, when you look at production, because his production last year looks like that of a top 5 quarterback. If we're talking about most fortunate situation, sure, Hurts is 1, Jared Goff is 2. To have especially what he had with that offensive line last year, with Ben Johnson calling plays, with the skill position talent. It's a ridiculous situation.
You make a really good point there. The important distinction I would make, too, about Goff as a pocket passer is I think he's more susceptible to being rattled by that pressure than some other pocket passers. One, because he is limited as a mover, but I also don't think he's one of these elite pocket movers. Like, I think Dak is a better pocket mover than Jared Goff. Goff kind of has that statue syndrome sometimes where if a guy isn't open immediately in that structured play, he can kind of crumble. Goff's still a great quarterback, though. I don't want to take anything away from him. But, again, we got to split hairs here. We're ranking the top 10.
We are. Another one of my toughest cuts, and I have a feeling this guy will probably be on your list. CJ Stroud, man. And it's not really due to any shortcoming of his. I just like 10 guys a little bit more. And CJ had a down season, certainly compared to his rookie year, but I still think that he's really good. I still think that, considering his situation, that he has one of the worst offensive lines in football, and that receiving core was banged up. I thought his ability at times to manage third and long and deal with pressure and create out of structure, not at an elite level, but at a high level, and not have an elite arm necessarily, but to still have a good arm. Like, he does a lot of stuff that I like. I also think his composure and sort of his clutch factor, like, pretty impressive. But like I said, there's just 10 guys who I like more. I'm really high on my guy in the 10 spot. I think that he was a little bit more impressive even dealing with a difficult situation. And then I know you're going to have this guy on your list. I do have Baker Mayfield as one of my toughest cuts and one of my honorable mentions. Yeah. You get excited just at the mention of his name, Logan. You can't even get mad that he's not on my list because you love him so much. I think Baker is really, really good. And I think that he is in an offensive situation, or at least was last year, that was really maxing him out with a great play caller in Liam Cohen, with a great offensive line, with a really effective run game, and he put up explosive numbers. The thing is, I think we've also seen some of the lows with him in suboptimal situations, and I do think he's improved since then, but we also saw him have a great season in Cleveland in 2020 and then fall off a cliff as the situation got worse. Like, if he has another great season
that had
this
more
year,
to do with his shoulder injury than anything else, man.
but there was a multiple year dip there. I also just think he does still have that bozo gene where he is liable to make some very, very costly mistakes, and had 15 picks this year, also is definitely susceptible for a good fumble or two. So that's just where it comes down to him being barely off my list. Again, I think that my 10th spot is just a little bit better at mitigating a very difficult situation, managing that. But I don't have a problem with you having Baker here. I mean, the production is incredible. The arm talent's really good. I think he's more athletic than he's ever been. He did more as a mover this past year than he's ever been, but can just be a little bit unpredictable and erratic at times with the mistakes.
He's in my 10 spot. Let's get into it.
Okay.
I mean, you say erratic, I say maverick, I say playmaker, I say cavalier. I mean, just, he's a buccaneer, man. He's a pirate. He's a swashbuckler, you know? He's going to make plays. That was a dynamic that I think I've been too critical of quarterbacks before on. I've kind of flipped on this. Look, I think protecting the football is one of the most important things that you can do in the game. There's a reason that we praise Tom Brady so much. There's a reason that we praise Aaron Rodgers so much, right? These kings and captains of efficiency. And so you do have to, there's a little bit of a balancing act between how buck you can get, how much of the gunslinger that you want, versus, you know, what good you're getting with it. You live by the gunslinger, you die by him too. Mayfield, since he became a starter in Tampa Bay, does have the most passing touchdowns of any quarterback with 69. Nice. He's also got the most turnovers by any quarterback over that same time period with 26. But for context, here are guys with 24 or more turnovers in that same time period. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Geno Smith, Jared Goff. The reality of the quarterback in the modern position is if you are going to be one of these guys that is going to elevate your offense and make these big-time plays, inevitably, you're going to turn the ball over sometimes. And so I've kind of flipped on its head after watching a full season as a Steelers fan of Russell Wilson. Show some balls, man. Put them on the table. Like, I loved Big Ben for that when he played for the Steelers, and as I've gotten older, I'm okay with you turning over the ball if you're going to put it in the end zone a lot too, and Baker's very good at doing that. I will say, I think his situation over the last 2 years kind of tends to get overrated. I think last season in Tampa Bay, there was a massive improvement in the offensive line with what they did through the draft and getting a guy like Graham Barton, who is phenomenal. There was a massive improvement in the running game when they got Bucky Irving, and I think that's very important to mention. But it's also important to mention that 2 years ago in 2023, that the success has been sustained across both situations. The Bucs had the worst rushing attack in the NFL in 2023. They couldn't run the ball between the tackles. They still won the division. Baker still put up great passing numbers and led that offense to pretty good success. And I also think the receiving point can get overrated a little bit too. Last season, he played 10 games without Chris Godwin, where he put up 23 TDs, with just 10 picks, had 264 passing yards per game on 72% completion percentage and a passer rating just south of 107. And we saw him in 3 games without Mike Evans, where he was above water at least. 6 TDs, 71% completion percentage, and a passer rating north of 96. The receivers are ultimately, though, I think it's all important to mention, because I think a lot of people who don't like Baker Mayfield or will try to make arguments against him will inflate this situation to heights that it isn't at. It is a good situation, though. I do want to hammer that home. Good play calling, good offensive line now, great running game last year. And Mike Evans is a monster. Mike Evans is why Baker Mayfield is in my 10 spot and he's not number 9. The Bucs offense has a difference of a touchdown per game with and without Mike Evans. Last season, they averaged 23 points per game without Mike. They averaged 30 points per game with Mike. Mike's a Hall of Fame receiver. Like, that's not even debatable to me at this point. I think Mike's probably, with his quarterback play, probably one of the most underrated guys ever. Like, he has just been consistently successful with whoever is under center. If it was Jameis Winston, if it is Baker, like, Mike's a GOAT. And it is the turnovers, and it's ultimately, too, some of the athletic limitations that I think Baker has. Baker's not as athletic as the guy in my number 9 spot. I don't think he's got as good of an arm as the guy in my number 9 spot. He doesn't have some of the other physical traits. And I think the guy in my number 9 spot, his situation has been a lot more difficult over the past few seasons than Baker. But I can't just overlook the wild success that Baker has had through the air. Like, he's been great over these past 2 years. I always saw this coming with Baker. I thought that the Browns year was flukish. I couldn't believe that he was a free agent and that people were just giving up on the guy that early on to his career. But those are the reasons why he can't be higher on my list. I would like him to protect the ball a little bit better. He is in a privileged situation where I think the Bucs have him set up for success. But he's a damn good quarterback, and I think one of the premier pocket passers in the league nowadays. And as you mentioned, Carson was a little more athletic. I think the most rushing yards he's ever had in a single season in his career last year. So he's also my baby boy. Man, I couldn't leave Baker off this list.
No, of course not. I wouldn't ask you to. The thing that I would hammer home when it comes to why I have Baker just off my list is it's not just turnovers, it's mistakes. And what I mean by that is I agree with you that, like, I can live with turnovers when you're creating at a high level, right? This is something that, as a Josh Allen fan and as a Bills fan for years, I saw people talk about, the turnovers. And I said, okay, what does it matter? He's putting an offense on his back with a just okay offensive line, with a just okay receiving group, with mediocre running backs. And still, they're a top 5 offense every single year because he's creating at an all-time great level. You're going to get some turnovers with that level of burden. The thing is, Baker doesn't have that level of burden, right? He's not creating at that level. He's in a more privileged situation. And also, the other kind of mistake that can really kill an offense is taking sacks. And that's where Baker is one of the worst in football, because even though he has a great offensive line, when he does get pressured, he gets sacked at a very high rate. He has a bottom 3 pressure to sack rate of all quarterbacks with at least 320 dropbacks this past year. The rest of the bottom 5 is Will Levis, Caleb Williams, Gardner Minshew, and Jameis Winston. So they're like the stereotypical playing like chickens with their heads cut off, running around, chaos agents kind of guys, dudes who nobody really would view last year as starting caliber quarterbacks, except maybe Caleb, but like that was the biggest criticism, right? Is he took way too many sacks, took too long to make decisions. And then you have Baker in with those guys, which I do think speaks to the fact that the pocket presence with him can be shaky. He's just a wild man back there. He's a wild man for good and for bad, but I don't know. I think there's just a little bit too much downside there to have him in my top 10. And also, you mentioned the situation 2 years ago, and I agree. I think it got dramatically better in 2024, but also the offense got dramatically better. It's not like, Baker also was carrying them to be a really good offense in 2023. They were the number 20 scoring offense, and his individual production got a lot better in 2024. So no question the situation got a lot better, and accordingly, Baker and the Bucs offense all looked a lot better. So for me in a vacuum, I can't quite have him above kind of my darling baby boy, a lot of people's darling baby boys, one of the most divisive quarterbacks in the NFL, I think. I've got Geno Smith in my 10 spot. And when we ranked all 32 starting quarterbacks in whatever it was of last year, we had Theo on before the playoffs, I think I had Geno at number 13, and I regretted it. And I kind of instantly felt like I was underrating him a bit because I think Geno just tends to get underrated by a lot of people because, again, numbers can lie in football. And this is a guy who was in an extremely difficult situation. He had probably the worst offensive line in football. And still, if you look at the last 3 years, his 17-game averages, 4,200 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 picks, 250 passing yards a game, 7.4 yards per attempt. Like, still quite good production, not top of the line in a vacuum, but for God's sakes, man, he doesn't have the Lions offensive line in front of him. He doesn't have those receivers, that run game, that play calling. Like, he is somebody who every play basically was starting from a hellish position and having to work his way out of it. And I talk about pressure to sack rate, how Baker struggles there. Geno's pressure to sack rate is awesome. Even though like the bottom line sack numbers might be similar, it's because Geno was getting pressured way, way more because his offensive line couldn't block anybody. I just think when you look at the traits, that ability to manage pressure, he's very high level. His arm is really good. His accuracy is great. He is fearless. He is a guy who will hang in the pocket and make big time throws downfield into tight windows with pressure bearing down on him. And I really value all of those things. I think those are things that translate to any situation where Geno is going to elevate your offense. I get it with him. The picks would be the only knock, and there were a few bad ones last year, but the situation was just so hard with a terrible offensive line, with a bad run game, and still he's churning out solid offenses just on his shoulders. So when I did rank him, last time we did this with Theo, I think I was just a little bit too freaked out in that moment by the picks. But when I think about it removed from like that moment, I think that he's been over-criticized for that. I think even I probably overly criticized him for that. And I think he's just too damn good. And his ability to persevere and produce in a really bad situation is really impressive. I have been adamantly on the pro-Geno side these last few years. I remain there. I'm excited to see what he does with the Raiders. It's not like he's heading into a great situation, but I do think it's an improved one. And I do think he's a guy who has the ability to really elevate a situation. Unfortunately, he's in one of the toughest divisions in football, so maybe they still don't win a ton. Maybe he still doesn't get a ton of credit, but I am consistently very impressed by Geno when I see him play, so I do have him in my 10 spot.
Geno's in my number 9 spot.
Nice.
That's exactly what I wrote down about Geno. He's consistently elevated suboptimal offensive situations for 3 straight seasons. There's only 2 quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 3 seasons with a pressure rate over 21%. Those quarterbacks are Geno Smith and Russell Wilson. And I want to be clear about that stat. It's not 21% overall as a number. It's 21% each of the 3 straight seasons. So those guys have consistently ranked there. Also, as you mentioned, the Seahawks have had the number 28 rushing attack for back-to-back seasons. This is a guy that doesn't have a release valve where he can just hand the rock off and boom, they're producing great offense. And don't get me wrong, I wish Geno was more effective in the red zone, and I wish he was better at protecting the football, but those are only the 2 gripes that I have about him. He is 9th in total yards per game since 2022, and he is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. 6% above league average on-target percentage last season. That's where he led the NFL in on-target percentage. 81.8%. He's at 68.5% completion over the last 3 seasons. He throws with accuracy, velocity, anticipation. I think he is an underrated scrambler and mobile QB. And you said it, dude. It is his fearlessness, his ability to climb a pocket, and that's why I put him here. Geno has really huge, massive balls. He takes shots in tight windows. He stands in the pocket and delivers under pressure. I want that guy under center. There are other guys that fold up, and that is a big difference to me between Geno and a guy like Baker. Geno can legitimately scramble and move. He is way better at mitigating pressure and moving within the pocket and finding angles. And as it goes for Vegas, I think the dynamic has changed. I think there's a difference in the skill position talent. Like, I think Seattle has much better skill position talent overall, top to bottom. I don't want to shake a stick at the Raiders. I think the running game should be better with Ginty. He's got Bowers and Myers. Like, I think that's a pretty big deal, but I do think the Seahawks are better in the receiving room. There is a slight improvement in the offensive line play, though. I think Vegas's offensive line is a little bit better with Jackson Powers-Johnson, with Colton Miller. So it's a little bit different, but it's like, it's not like I think the Vegas situation is dramatically worse than Seattle. Like, I think Seattle was one of the toughest situations to put a quarterback in and just tell him to go succeed. And that's what Geno's done the past 3 years. So I felt like even though I was high on Geno when we ranked our quarterbacks back then, I think even I was a little bit too low. And I do prefer Geno's veteran presence to a guy like Jordan Love as well, and like that sort of dynamic. And I'm wishing him the best, man. I hope Geno lights it up in Vegas.
I would agree that the receiving talent is better in Seattle. Like the JSN DK combo was this past year better than what the Raiders have.
And Lockett too.
Yeah, but Lockett wasn't that good this past
year.
I know,
but I mean he's a solid number 3 still. I mean, he's old, but
yeah, he's all right. He's not a needle mover though. And when I look at the Raiders, I do think that Brock Bowers is really good. I do think that Jacoby Myers is pretty good, and I think it's really the difference in hopefully their ability to run the ball and just going from absolutely hellish offensive line to solid offensive line. That's a significant upgrade. So I think Geno's numbers actually are going to look better this year. I think the Raiders are going to be very solid. Again, the division is really tough, but if there's anybody who gives me confidence in them, it's Geno, man. I am a believer, and I have him in my top 10, but you have him one spot higher. So in my number 9 spot, I have Jordan Love, who you mentioned is not on your list. I think Jordan Love is still really good, man. And I know that some people are low on him right now, and that, again, to me, just speaks to the overreaction to one bad playoff game, which, to me, does not nearly override the fact that for the last 2 years, this guy's looked like a top 10 quarterback. He averages 3,800 yards, 29 touchdowns, 11 picks. You mentioned the consistency, and that is the next step for him. Because he has this 6 to 8 week stretches, and they tend to coincide with the Toyotathon, where he is on top of the world and he is letting it rip, and he's literally stringing together like 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks week after week. And then you do have a moment where like the decision making with him is consequential. And like I mentioned with Goff, I don't think that Love is at that level. Like, I think that Goff has the bozo gene, and I think he's also limited at times by his inability to move, and that can put pressure on him to sometimes try things, make mistakes that he otherwise wouldn't or shouldn't if he could move more capably. But Love does have that dynamic where like sometimes things come in waves for him. He's really great in stretches, and then he can struggle with the turnovers more in stretches. Like he had, if I'm not mistaken, 11 picks in the first 8 weeks this past year, and then 0 in the remaining 7 games that he played in the regular season. And then they came back in the playoffs. So I understand that criticism of him, but again, I look at traits with quarterbacks because I think traits are things that translate in a vacuum, and he's just got a lot of traits that I really like. He is athletic enough to move around and extend plays, but he's also incredible at managing pressure and avoiding sacks. He's second best in the NFL, only to Josh Allen this past year in terms of his sack rate, and he also has the elite arm and the creativity to make some great plays out of structure. But he loves to throw off his back foot. And he hits them at a pretty damn high rate. So he can do the stuff out of structure while he is limiting sacks at an elite level, which I think is such a valuable thing from your quarterback. And then he's also a fantastic play-action quarterback, one of the best in football, which I think is so valuable in a LaFleur scheme, which does often put a premium on running the ball to set up the play action, to set up the passing game. And I think Jordan Love can really execute that scheme within structure at a high level, and he can hit on some big plays in doing so. Like, you want to talk about a bad playoff game this year, okay, that's fine, but he absolutely filleted the Cowboys in the playoffs in 2023, and some of that was set up by the run game being so dominant, definitely, but nevertheless, he was making the big throws as well. So I think the decision-making with him just needs to be a little more consistent. That's really my criticism of Jordan Love, but he's an explosive play machine. He does so much that I like at the position, and I just think he's too good not to be here. I'm a believer in him, and so if I'm putting stock in him and that's controversial, I'm happy to do so. I think he's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, I have no issue with you having Jordan Love here. And he, again, was probably my second toughest cut to Jalen Hurts. The consistency thing, and then the other thing that with Jordan Love is that I do think he's elevated a really bad receiving group over the past 2 seasons. Not really bad. I don't want to say that. But they're
a
just
group that lacks a true number one.
Number one.
Definitely.
They're solid. And that's where this year I think there could be a big difference. I really like Matthew Golden. I think he is going to emerge as the guy in this group. And that's where I do expect Jordan Love to take a leap. Not only because this is his third year starting, like he just has more experience. And I think if there's anything you're going to take away from a resurgence like a Baker, like a Geno, experience is invaluable. And that's why I think we're seeing more and more quarterbacks have these kind of Sam Darnold, right? Like these guys just have gotten the reps and they're more confident. And I think we're going to see Love get better and get more consistent. And I think he has the best receiver that he's ever had in the room. And so I do expect him to flourish this season. So I think it's a good idea to buy low. I'm going to buy some stock in a young quarterback that you don't have on your list either. I have C.J. Stroud in my number 8 spot. And I know that people were disappointed with C.J. Stroud's sophomore season. I get it. It's hard not to be disappointed. When you set expectations so high for yourself, it's hard to replicate. Like, he had the greatest rookie season of all time. And then I know people, oh my God, you guys say that every year. I'm sorry. Rookie quarterbacks are coming in every year, and they're just better than they've ever been before. Baker set the bar. Then Herbert set the bar. Then Stroud set the bar. If we go further back than that, Andrew Luck. It's like they're just getting better and better. And then Jayden came along and moved the bar up even higher. That's just a reality. Like, quarterbacks are better and more equipped to come in and ball out than they ever have been before. I don't take a lot away negatively from C.J. Stroud's sophomore campaign. I think it was one of the most difficult situations to succeed in the NFL. He was the most hurried quarterback in the NFL. He was number 1 in pressure rate, 6% higher than 2023, where basically he was league average as a rookie, and then he had probably the worst O-line. They were tied 3rd in most sacks allowed. You mentioned how banged up the receiving group was. For me, I get that the numbers aren't going to blow you away because it's 20 TDs to 12 picks. And he, again, set the standard so high for himself because of how efficient he was as a quarterback. But you're talking about the traits, Carson, and I look at his sophomore campaign as a learning experience for CJ. He learned how to create out of the pocket more than he did in his rookie season, where he was pretty good. He learned how to deal with pressure better and the angles that he needed to take. But, I'm not going to shit on the guy because every game he is just under this hellish pressure. I just think it was one of the most difficult situations of any quarterback in the league last season, and he didn't thrive, but he didn't completely fail either.
No.
I just think that's the area of this team that they need to address. The receivers are going to get healthy. I think they've got a really good receiving room. If they can just protect up front for CJ, I think you're going to see the guy ball out. He has a rocket of an arm. He is super accurate. He is really mobile, and I like him throwing off platform and out of the pocket. I think he is a really good out-of-structure quarterback when he needs to make stuff happen. And again, I think his situation is just one of the most difficult in the NFL. So don't get me wrong. I am going to knock him for not being as great as he could have been and, continuing to build upon what he did as a rookie, but I'm not just going to take all my stock out of the guy and act like he doesn't deserve to be here. I think all the tools are there. I think all the abilities are there, and I think if they can just protect up front, I think you're going to see the guy flourish. So he's in my number 8 spot.
Yeah, I like CJ. I think he's going to be back in my top 10 sooner rather than later, and I think there is a legitimate argument. And him versus Geno is an interesting comparison because, they are the two guys you look at, and they had truly terrible offensive lines, bottom 3 offensive lines, both of them were dealing with. And so they're having to deal with that pressure more consistently than anybody else. And I do think that Geno's got a little bit more arm talent. I think he's even a little bit more accurate as a thrower of the football. I think he's more audacious. He's more ballsy. But I also think that CJ is a better mover. I think they can both move around, but CJ's better, more dynamic there. And I think that CJ is also less prone to like a back-breaking pick, which Geno can give you every once in a while.
Sorry, not to cut you off. I think CJ's better moving behind the line of scrimmage. I do prefer Geno as like a straight-up scrambler and rusher when he gets like in the open field.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that they're both pretty solid there. And they're very similar levels as quarterbacks. I do slightly prefer Geno because of the factors that I mentioned, the arm talent, the audacity, the accuracy, but it's very close. In my number 8 spot, I have a guy who is not on your list, and that's Dak Prescott. And honestly, I was happy to hear you at least give him an honorable mention because this is one ranking I do remember from when we did our list with Theo. You had Dak as the number 17 quarterback in the NFL, which was criminal, man. And I know there are some people who are probably cheering, man. You probably got the mob ignited, everybody ready for their Cowboys hate sesh. And look, feel free, go
It's
ahead.
cool to hate the
all you
Cowboys.
want.
It's still cool to hate the Cowboys, man. It's never been out of style.
And I've got no problem with that. But what I would say is, don't channel so much of it towards Dak Prescott, man, because Dak is really, really good. Over the last 4 years, Dak's 17-game averages would be 4,430 yards, 34 touchdowns against 13 picks. His last 2 fully healthy seasons have both been at least fringe MVP caliber. Like 2021, he had 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 picks, and led the number 1 offense in football. And then in 2023, he had 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, 9 picks, and led the number 1 offense. But that's the time he really got MVP buzz because he did it with a below-average run game, a mediocre offensive line, and one awesome receiver in CeeDee Lamb, absolutely top tier, but a below-average group around him. I just think he is one of the absolute best pocket passers in football today. He is truly elite there. He is aggressive. He is accurate. He's got great pocket footwork. He's got great anticipation. Like, he has just nearly mastered that aspect of the game. And so I'm not going to overreact to a couple extra bad picks last year when he's trying to carry the entire offense because the run game was so ineffective for a team that also couldn't get any stops. Like every possession, it's like, all right, Dak, we need you to score because we're letting up 27 points per game on the other side. I was really disappointed by the Cowboys last year, really disappointed. And I get that Dak also did not play his best, but I think he got too much blame for that situation when the year before he did something that very few quarterbacks in the NFL could have, elevating that situation to being the number 1 offense in the league. And I just think his resume is fantastic. If you look at these years, like, yeah, there's too many dips for him to be among the elite guys because there are stretches where he turns the ball over too much. And so that's why he's not in my top 5, but I think he has to be in my top 10. He's just done things that everybody below him hasn't in terms of engineering elite offense without an elite situation.
He's in my top 13. Dak would be my third guy off.
You know what, man? I'll take it.
I'll tell you what. The only thing that would make me root for the Cowboys is George Pickens. And so, you know what, Dak? I think not only do I hope it happens, I think he could throw for 5K this year, bruh. That's one of my I don't even know if it's a hot take because, like, 5K has kind of been not diminished, but like with the 17 games, it is a little bit easier to do, right? But CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Mr. Ferguson, dude, I think the Cowboys offense could be really explosive and across the top of the league. And I know you always talk about this, but I mean, they were a top 5. Was he the number 1 offense, 2-3 years ago? What was it? You always say that stat when you're talking about Dak.
Number 1 offense in 2023 and number 1 offense in 2021. And also, on the 5,000 yards point, which is purely hypothetical, I mean, I'd like to pencil Dak in for 5K. Why not? You mentioned it being devalued a bit with the 17-game season, but also we haven't seen it in the last couple years because passing production is down a little bit, teams going more too high, teams running the ball more to counter that. So that would be an incredibly impressive achievement if anybody can pull it off. And I think that Dak is a legitimate candidate to do it. I think that with Pickens, that receiving core is significantly improved. I mean, what a dynamic duo. The thing is, I just still think that the offensive line is very mediocre.
For sure.
If not flat out below average. And so I still worry Is the run game going to be effective? Those would be my concerns. I still think there's a huge burden on Dak, and he's going to have to produce in spite of that and try to elevate a situation, but I do think he's capable of doing that. Who is in your number 7 spot, Logan?
Well, speaking of offensive engines and guys overcoming, I think, not elite offensive situations, I've got Matthew Stafford in my 7 spot, and I would hear an argument if anybody wanted to make Matthew Stafford up to number 5 with his resume and his track record over the past few seasons. The reason he's down at number 7, and I do a little bit of projecting with this, not fully, but I do a little bit. He is entering his age 37 season. He is struggling with an aggravated disc in his back, which back injuries are just so detrimental for any athlete. Your back is so important in all of your daily functions as anybody, right? In your daily life, like if you it affects everything. And so I am a little bit worried, an aging quarterback with a back injury, is he going to be able to take on the Herculean sort of responsibility that he has had for this Rams offense over the past few seasons? Because I think it's remarkable, man. No shade at like Cooper and Nakua, but like, I don't know, man. I kind of feel like you could kind of put anybody with Stafford and he'd make them good. Like the fact that Jordan Whittington came in last season, right, and he's making him look like a beast. And maybe the Rams just have an affinity for finding gems of wide receivers. I think that's a component of it as well. Like I think their scouting department in drafting team is really good at finding guys that work. But Stafford is just great at elevating guys that you put along with him because he has got this all-time arm talent still at his old age. The angles, the velocity, the ball placement. And again, he has this veteran feel where he's really good at moving his feet and planning. And I don't want to say like, because I think Geno's really good at climbing the pocket and moving it. Matthew Stafford is really good at being efficient with his footwork, where it's not like Geno where he's – well, also Geno does have to run around like a chicken with his head cut off because his offensive line is so bad. But with Geno, right, it's more of like a full sprint up the pocket and finding it. With Stafford, it's like, all right, 2-3 steps, and he's planning and getting rid of the ball. He's so efficient with his footwork. And I think that can kind of tend to get overlooked and underappreciated with veteran pocket passers like a Stafford.
And Dak.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm. Of course, I am blinded by my hatred for the Cowboys, but Dak as well. I don't really have anything negative to say about Matthew Stafford. I think he's done a very good job of elevating poor offensive situations. I think they had a really bad running game last season. I mean, putrid. And it's really just his age. I think that we're on the start of the decline for Stafford. And I don't think it's going to be rapid. I don't think he's going to nosedive or anything like that. There's a reason he's still in my top 10, but I think it's going to be marginal. And I am a little bit worried about this back injury, man, at a guy of his age. And there's 2 young quarterbacks above him that I am just so confident in that they are going to blossom and have A-tier seasons. So really, I don't have anything negative to say about Matthew Stafford. I still think he's phenomenal.
So you bring up the age and the injury stuff and projecting, and that's where one last thing I should clarify about my criteria now that we're an hour into the episode. It's probably a good time to get this off. Same rules for basically every list that we do on that front, all the NBA rankings we've done. I'm not projecting. I'm going off of concretely what we've seen in terms of projecting improvement or regression from these players in a vacuum. I'm not doing that. And also, I am evaluating guys based on when they're healthy, so I'm not factoring in durability in that sense, but I do think it's a fair thing for you to point out, and it's actually something I think is worth bringing up with Dak as well, coming off of the hamstring injury. Those are 2 guys who are getting older, who are kind of consistently a little bit banged up, and obviously mobility is already regressed for both of them, but how much is that going to be a factor, I think is a fair question to raise. That being said, Matthew Stafford is 37 years old and still playing elite football, so I'm not going to be the one who is going to predict any sort of fall off from him until it happens. I'm not going to go on a spiel about the Matt Stafford cliff because the guy's still balling. So I have him 1 spot higher at number 6, and I know the bottom line numbers won't blow you away from this past year, but just watch Matt Stafford in a big game. And, like, I know that I talk about playoff football and regular season football not being nearly as different as they are in, say, the NBA, but I do think that there are certain traits that do tend to pop up in guys who excel in these playoff situations or these big game situations. And Stafford has all of them when it comes to the poise, the decision making, and the elite arm talent. He's just so great in all those ways. And he's balled out. Playoff games over the last 2 years, 300 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, no picks, 110 passer rating, consistently elevates to a really high level. And also, like, it's not a small sample size with him. Look at last year. Rams had one of the worst run games in football. They had a mediocre and banged up offensive line. Puka and Kupp were both in and out of the lineup, and Kupp has taken a step back. But, like, he played more than a handful of games where either one of those players was out. And their defense was number 26 in points allowed per drive. All those factors working against them, and you look up, they won 10 games. They were one of the hottest teams in football down the stretch. They made the playoffs, and they won a playoff game. That's the Matt Stafford effect. Like, he's one of those guys who can sort of put Flex Seal on the situation and keep you afloat, keep you alive, because the arm is still ridiculous. The audacity as a passer is still top tier. The things that he will attempt, his ability to process the game is still such high-level stuff. His limitation is his mobility, and I get that. I still trust him more than everybody below him. And I know who you're going to have one spot higher, I presume, maybe multiple, who is young, who is extremely dynamic. The sample size from that guy just isn't enough yet to put him above somebody who I know is as reliably great as Matt Stafford. So, do you have Jayden Daniels in your 6th spot, Logan? Am I reading you like a book there? Am I guessing correctly?
I do.
Okay. I have Jayden at number 7. And I do think that Jayden just had the best rookie quarterback season we've seen. Led a top 5 offense with 4,400 total yards, 31 touchdowns to 9 turnovers. Was elite in terms of passing efficiency, elite in terms of rushing efficiency, and then walked into the postseason and in 3 playoff games had 960 total yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick with the lowest sack rate in the field. Like, I just think he did everything necessary to stamp himself as a top 7 quarterback. As a rookie, I do view him as more of an offensive engine than the guys below him. Just because that dual threat ability is so special. Outside of Lamar Jackson, there is not a more dangerous rushing threat at the quarterback position right now than Jayden Daniels, and he is also a very good passer and is really good at leveraging that rushing threat into easy passing reads and opportunities. And I also think he just got better as the year went along. Like, obviously, from the start, he was completely transformative in the run game. And I thought Washington and Cliff Kingsbury did a nice job of setting him up, gaining early down yardage off screens, off of run plays to where he was consistently sitting in 2nd and short or 3rd and short. And he had opportunities then to hit on shot plays if it's 2nd and short, right? And open up some of those vertical plays with the threat of the run game. Or on 3rd and short, just, okay, we're in a comfortable short yarded situation. This is a good spot for you to convert. You have the dual threat aspect. But then I thought as the year went along, he got tested more, and it wasn't as much, okay, we're picking up these easy early down yards. It was, okay, you are going to have to hang tough in the pocket more. You're going to have to make some more big-time throws, deal with pressure, really progress through your reads. Become not just a guy who is executing this unique system, but a true quarterback, a true captain of the offense. And I thought he did all that stuff. All the while keeping turnovers pretty low, all the while leading out an offense that was top of the line situationally on 3rd down, 4th down, obviously, red zone, like in all these different areas. He's just such an impactful rusher, such an accurate thrower of the football. Doesn't have that elite arm strength for sure, but checks so many other boxes. So really the only reason I can't have him higher is the top 6 are that good, and the sample is still smaller with Jayden. Like, I give him credit for improving as a processor, as a captain of the offense as the year went along. But let's see how year 2 goes, because I think he's going to continue to be stressed and challenged there. And obviously, it's such a cliche, it really is, but teams have a year of him on film now. And like, the reality is just that great rookie seasons are consistently difficult to replicate in year 2. I think Jayden has as good a chance as anybody to replicate a phenomenal rookie season. It's just I know what I'm getting from Matt Stafford because the guy's been doing it for 15 years and Jayden just did it for 1.
I understand that. But, I mean, I feel like I'm more confident in Jayden Daniels than any quarterback that I've watched to replicate his success from the year before. I mean, it really is the unique skill set that Jayden has. I mean, he has the potential to be one of the best dual threats we've ever seen. He has a special – he's so agile. He's like slippery back there. He's one of the best quarterbacks. And my biggest thing about Jayden, I didn't think Jayden was going to be successful in the NFL. I thought he was too small. I thought he might get licked a couple of times and fall out. One, he's really good at mitigating getting hit really hard. Like, he's just good at getting out of bounds and taking care of his body. But he is slippery. Like, he is super elusive and agile back there, where I do want to give the Washington offensive line and infrastructure that Washington has credit. I think they have a good offensive line. I thought they did a phenomenal job for him up front. But he is a special play extender and play creator behind the line of scrimmage. I do think at this stage in his career that is a concrete advantage that he has over a Matthew Stafford. I think Stafford has a better arm in terms of accuracy and strength, even at his old age. Maybe not accuracy, but definitely strength. And accuracy downfield, I would still say I would give to Stafford.
Tight window accuracy, Stafford still got him.
But Jayden is so good at extending plays and creating out of structure and scrambling. I can't take that for granted. He did just have the greatest rookie QB season in NFL history. Only 8 rookie quarterbacks have ever made the conference title game in the Super Bowl era. That's Jayden, Brock Purdy, Mark Sanchez, Joe Flacco, Big Ben, Sean King in 99, Dieter Brock, a 34-year-old rookie out of the CFL, and Pat Hayden. That's in the Super Bowl era. But it's the most responsible a rookie quarterback has ever been for his team's success. I gave this spiel a bunch of times last year when we were talking about Jayden for context, but all of those guys had really great defenses. That was the strength and bedrock of those teams and those units. This is the best offense that's ever been let out by a rookie quarterback. You mentioned it. Top 5 in terms of points per game in the regular season, 28.5. In the playoffs, his offense put up 30 points per game. They had the number 6 third down offense, the number 6 red zone offense, and the number 1 fourth down offense. And they had the number 18 defense. You just don't see that from rookie quarterbacks. I think he has got a really, really special dual threat skill set, and I think he is going to continue to dominate and lead out great offenses next season. So it's close between the two, but I really am confident in Jayden continuing this into year 2.
Also, I mean, another impressive aspect, he had some of the clutchest moments of the year. 5 fourth-quarter comebacks if you include the playoffs, 5 game-winning drives. So I see the case for Jayden. I do think sample size is going to be enough to keep him at number 7 for me. And also, I think just that improvement as a pure drop-back passer, which is not to say that he's not good there, but he is definitely not at the level of the top 6, and he can supplement that with his great rushing threat, but there's a sizable gap there. And I do think that that's a very important thing when you get into some of these high-stakes moments, big games. But boy, was he impressive as a rookie. Literally the most impressive rookie season ever. So I can't say a bad word about Jayden Daniels. ASU legend Jayden Daniels, shout out. Who is in your number 5 spot, Logan?
This guy also had one of the greatest, arguably, rookie seasons ever. He's a little bit older now. That is Justin Herbert. And I know people are always, I feel like, overly critical of Justin Herbert, and it can be disappointing when they put up 12 points in a playoff game, and I feel like a lot of people may overreact to letdown games from Herbert on the stage. I don't, like you mentioned earlier, I think when you have a bigger sample size, like, I will be critical. Like, if we have, like, I am critical of Peyton Manning and some of his playoff letdowns in his career, as successful as he was as a regular season quarterback. I think it's important to mention when you have that big of a sample size. But 2 games, it's not big enough for me just yet. I do think he needs to get that monkey off his back. That is the thing that is holding Justin Herbert back from really cracking the top list. But when people get critical of him, I also want to mention just the difference in stylistical play, the difference in how he has played the position last year to his early years in the league, and also how much better the team was. One, when he was with Brandon Staley, Herbert was elevating those teams by himself. Those defenses were bad. Sure, the skill positions were good and stuff, but Herbert is coming out every game and just slinging the hell out of the ball because he has no other choice.
And the run game was consistently terrible. They had one of the worst rushing attacks in football.
Yeah, in the Chargers, every single game you watch, they are trailing in these games and they are losing. And it was like the game script of, I feel like Theo. It's not his fault, man, but like
Cook.
Every game you watch of the Chargers with Brandon Staley, it followed the same game script. Herbert puts them ahead. Oh, let's go. And then 4 minutes left in the game, the other team scores, and then Herbert's got to trot back out there, and he's got to put the team on his back and score again. A lot of the time they would, and then the other team would score again, and they'd just lose. It's so frustrating. And then last season, we saw the complete overhaul of the Chargers. Year one of Harbaugh, and their identity changed. They became a more ground-heavy team where they are really strong in the trenches, and they're going to try to play this ball control brand of football where they're strong defensively, they're strong in the trenches, and Herbert's role is to manage the game, which he did at a very high level. He threw 3 interceptions last season. That is so hard to do. Like, Herbert and Lamar, really in a tier of their own of protecting the ball through the air and not sacrificing it. I mean, it's ridiculous
Josh Allen.
to be able to do that. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Josh Allen, last year.
I mean, how many did he have?
He had 6 picks.
That's impressive. I mean, super hard to do. And I think it's important to mention, of course, all of those teams have running games that they can rely on, right? Lamar and Josh are more solely responsible for their success in the run games. The Bills had a great running game, too, with Cook. You got to give him props. But it's hard to protect the ball like that. It's such an elite level through the air. And I still know Justin Herbert is capable of producing and putting up those kind of numbers when you put the infrastructure around him. Herbert has a good offensive line and he has a good running game. He still doesn't have a good receiving core. Like, the only guy I'd give him props is McConkey, and McConkey's that guy. If people don't know about McConkey yet, they're going to learn this year. The guy's an exceptional route runner. He has great footwork. I think he's got really good hands. He may not be the most explosive guy or anything like that, like twitchy after the catch, but he's a really good route runner, and I think he is a legitimate number 1 in the NFL. But the group around him stunk. I mean, you have got a straight-up run blocker in Will Dissly. Like, shout out Will Dissly and what he did, but he's not a receiver. He's not a big play threat. So I just think that there's a misattribution error with Justin Herbert, man, and it's a time-old argument, but I'm going to sing it from the mountaintop, man. With Staley, it was different. They didn't win games because the defense was bad, and Justin Herbert was doing everything he could. And so now people are going to be critical because he's not putting up these gaudy numbers, but they're winning games. It's like, I just don't know what Herbert can do to change people's minds. But I respect Herbert. I think as they put the receiving group around him, I think you are going to finally see the mend of both of the successes. I think you're going to see Herbert put up the numbers and have the winning side with it. So I want to be clear. I think there is a major, major gap between number 5 and my top 4 guys. Like, I think Herbert is concretely in this tier with, like, Jayden and with Matthew Stafford to me. And then I think there is a gap to the top 4 guys. But Herbert is elite, just like Jayden's elite, just like Stafford is elite. But I do think there's a pretty big gap between Herbert and my top 4 QBs.
I don't think that there's that big a gap. Like, I also have Herbert in my number 5 spot, but the interesting thing, man, is the winning is the knock on Herbert, right? And that's what you're hitting on over and over again, and that he's got to beat those allegations. Justin Herbert is the 6th most wins of any quarterback since he came into the league, 2020. He has more wins than Joe Burrow. He's played more games, but he also has same number of 10-win seasons. Like, he has consistently kept them afloat to be, like, not just save them from absolute dumpster fire status, but a winning team. He's got a winning record. He's got the 6th most wins among any quarterback since he came into the league. And then he's also got the 3rd most passing yards since he came into the league, behind only Mahomes and Josh Allen. He's got the 5th most passing touchdowns. Like, by every metric, the guy's just been an elite quarterback basically since he set foot in the league. And he plays one bad football game in the playoffs, and it's yippee! Justin Herbert sucks. Justin Herbert exposed. I just think it's so ridiculous, man. Like, years and years of elite football, and then he gets to the playoffs, plays one bad game, and everybody wants to write all that off. I just think it's such an overly simplistic and unfair way of viewing the game and of viewing the impact that a quarterback has. Like, he hasn't been put in situations to go on deep playoff runs. He has never had that caliber of roster around him. You touched on this, but if you look at the Staley years, like consistently, they had one of the worst defenses in football, and they had one of the worst rushing attacks in football. And they were still putting forth good offenses, put forth an elite offense in 2021 because Herbert was that good. And last year, it was the best team he's had. But that was because they invested so much in the defense and they improved so much on that side of the ball. Offensively, they still had very blah play calling, not creative whatsoever. The run game, they relied on more, but it was still inefficient. The receiving core, well below average. Like, I also like McConkey the honky, but Quentin Johnson as your number 2 receiver is ridiculous. And still, the Chargers were an above average offense. They were 13th in points per drive. Herbert had the most efficient season of his career. He averaged 7.7 yards per pass attempt. He had 23 touchdowns to 3 picks. Like, he has all this on his resume. And then he also has every trait. A-plus arm, ridiculous velocity on the ball, ability to just make throws that very few guys on the planet can. Great accuracy, hangs tough in the pocket, but he can also move, and he's got elite size. Like, he looks the part of the elite quarterback in all these ways because he is an elite quarterback in all these ways. Over 5 years in the league, the guy's 17-game averages are 45 40 yards, 30 touchdowns, under 10 picks, with a 97 passer rating, and a winning record. Like, I honestly can't believe the Herbert discourse because this is not some manufactured hype. Like, he has clearly been a top 5 quarterback quite consistently. There's no what if here. There's no like, oh, if only. Like, this is what he does. And then we can acknowledge, yeah, the situation for other guys has been significantly better. But in spite of that, Herbert has produced at this elite level. I just think a lot of the arguments that are used against him pretty much suck. Like, he came into the league pretty much immediately, put up explosive, dominant numbers, even with the subpar supporting cast, had one of the worst defenses and run games in football, still won at a solid rate. And then this year, the team invests more in defense, but they compromise even more on offense, and he adjusts. He does exactly what they need from him all year for 17 games, takes care of the ball at such a high level, is far and away their best offensive player. And then he plays one bad game and it all goes away to me. Like, I talk about not valuing the small playoff sample size as much as a lot of other people clearly do. If I am going to react to a small playoff sample, there's got to be something there that clearly indicates to me this player's game doesn't translate. I'll give you an example. Tua Tagovailoa, right, is a guy who you get in a cold weather environment. You get against an elite defense, and that's when his lack of arm talent, his inability to create out of structure, his panic under pressure at times, those are problems that the best teams in the toughest circumstances will expose, and I can see that, and I buy, okay, that's a guy who struggles in the playoffs and probably will continue to do so. Justin Herbert is elite in all these different ways and just played one bad football game. So he's clearly been a top 5 quarterback for 4 years. I have him in my top 5. No, I don't think he has a really strong claim for the number 4 spot right now, but I think he's had it before. And I think he is closer to those guys than he is probably to Stafford and to Jayden Daniels for me. Like, I believe in Herbert that much. This is another guy whose stock I am in with, and we'll see how it goes, man. But I'm a believer. I think he's a special talent, and I think he's a top 5 quarterback.
No doubt. No doubt. One of the most overly criticized quarterbacks on the planet. And it's weird, man. You know, I wouldn't feel the need to like address these things about Herbert, but it's like these people aren't just rage baiting. They're not just trolls. Like, they actually think Herbert doesn't belong in these conversations, and it's ridiculous, man.
I mean, here we go. I'll hit you with a what if, and the people will love this one. But like, there's actually people, lots of people, making an argument that Jalen Hurts is better than Justin Herbert right now.
That's ridiculous to me.
Like, just imagine the situation, Swap, man. Imagine the situation, and now I am doing the what if. But it's like, football is so situational, man. Circumstances are so impactful, as we talked about, on production and perception. And Herbert has gotten a really rough shake there. He's gotten a really raw deal. But the talent and the production and the traits, they're all very apparent. And I believe in all that stuff. So who's in your number 4 spot, Logan?
I've got Joe Burrow, and I know some people would argue Joe Burrow top 3, no, top 2. Joe Burrow's got his section of fans. What I would say to people who think Joe Burrow should be higher, this is the best top 4 quarterbacks of any period in NFL history. We already talked about this earlier. I think it's the deepest the position has ever been. I think it's also the most top-heavy the position has ever been. Like, even if we look back to what a lot of people think is the pinnacle of the QB position, Brady, Manning, Breeze, and then whoever you want to put as that fourth guy.
Well, Rodgers, right? I mean, if you're
Rodgers,
talking about
sure.
like the 2013 range, yeah.
Yeah. I think this is the best it's ever been. I think when you look at the dual threat abilities of guys like Lamar, of Mahomes, of Josh Allen, and obviously Lamar and Josh are in like their own tier as engines, I think there's a big gap. So some people might disagree. I think it's the best the position's ever been. All due respect to those guys. Burrow, I think, even though it's ironic that I'm making this argument when I have him at number 4, I do think he can kind of be the black sheep. I think he can be kind of the overlooked guy of this elite group. Burrow is so great at elevating his team to contention, and not necessarily like the offense in a vacuum. I do think he's got elite skill position talent alongside him. Not running back, right, but Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, that's an elite 1 and 2 kind of combo. But the defense is horrible. Bengals defense is one of the worst in the NFL, and the fact that they're able to be competitive and stay in these games and produce, it's a testament to Joe Burrow and his ability. Elite composure. The guy never looks flustered. He never looks overwhelmed. He is so composed. An elite arm talent in terms of accuracy and arm strength. The thing that I think gets overlooked about his arm ability is just his touch. Burrow is so good at throwing and fitting balls between zones and into tight windows and putting it exactly where it needs to be, wherever on the field. He's got great awareness in terms of like field mapping and knowing where guys are going to be and like mentally picturing the play in his head. He knows where guys are going to be. He is one of the most brilliant mentally quarterbacks I've ever seen. I don't say this lightly. I put him up there with the Brady, with the Drew Brees, with the Mahomes in terms of like brilliance. Like, and the thing that gets overlooked, and if you've been listening to Nerd Sesh for a while, you know I always praise this about Burrow. But the thing that makes him stand out from some of these other pocket passers is his pocket mobility and how to move within it. The thing that got overlooked consistently the most about Dan Marino at his apex was his feet. They asked Dan Marino, why are you special? Everybody always talks about his arm. It's his feet. It's his ability to move within the pocket, because you think about these guys in your head, they're not super mobile. They're not moving and scrambling behind the line of scrimmage and making plays, but they are moving where they need to go. It's like I talked about the efficiency of the footwork of a Matt Stafford, of a Dak Prescott. I think Burrow is on another level when we're talking about those guys. And it's his timing and his anticipation. It's all the hallmarks and qualities of the elite pocket passers. That's Joe Burrow. Ultimately, the difference is his limitations athletically. That's why he can't be top 3 to me, because I think that when you look at a Lamar or a Josh Allen, those guys can just raise your floor. They're just better offensive engines because of that scrambling ability and their ability in the red zone. And I don't want to take anything away from Joe, because Joe is great in spite of not having that quality. But when we are splitting hairs here, I do prefer that. Yeah, that's it. That's the only distinction I'd make about Joe. But damn, I love Joe Burrow, man. He is one of the most special minds and talents at the quarterback position, I think, in NFL history.
I have Burrow at number 4 as well. And this is a career season for him. I mean, 4,900 yards, 43 touchdowns, 9 picks, just a ridiculous season in terms of production. And I think you laid out a lot of what makes him special, but incredibly high football IQ. I would say the most accurate arm in football. Definitely in terms of arm strength, like multiple tiers below Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert even. But the most accurate arm in football. And he's probably the best pure pocket passer with the footwork, the ability to process the game, the anticipation, the accuracy, the aggression. I think you mentioned, I mean, specifically against zone inside the pocket, there's not a better quarterback than Joe Burrow, I wouldn't say, in football. But he's just not as transformative an offensive engine as the big 3. And to me, it is a big 3. I do think that as great as Burrow is, I couldn't argue him over any of my top 3 quarterbacks. I do really value that ability to single-handedly propel a situation from a different level. And Burrow's mastery inside the pocket is extremely valuable, but we've never seen him lead a top 5 scoring offense. And if you look at what Josh Allen has done, even at times in suboptimal situations, like in the early 2020s with mediocre running back play, with mediocre offensive lines, he's leading top 3 offenses every year. He just did it for the 4th time in 5 years. A top 3 offense. This past year, right, it was with receiving talent that everybody was doubting and calling out. He can just elevate a situation with his physical force, with his creation, with his ability in 3rd, 4th down situations, red zone, to just make unbelievable superhuman plays. Lamar has led back-to-back top 5 offenses, and he did that in 2023 before Derrick Henry, with a solid offensive line, with okay running back play, with probably subpar receiving play. He's that kind of engine. Patrick Mahomes, I don't think I should really have to make the case for. Like, that's the difference. It's not any fault of Burrow's. It's just the outright superhuman traits of the guys who are above him. And when you're looking at situation, like, I do think, again, those guys are better equipped to elevate and just turn out flat-out elite offenses regardless. Burrow's situation is interesting because his offensive line is weak, probably the weakest of any of these guys right now, although the Chiefs this year actually might have something to say about that. We'll see. But he also has 2 wide receivers, 2 pass catchers who are better than any of their number ones. If you put T. Higgins in the Ravens, Chiefs, or Bills receiving room, he is clearly the best player there, and that's not accounting for the fact that they have the guy who just had the Triple Crown and legitimately makes an argument as the best receiver in football. I take Justin Jefferson, but it's him and Chase in a tier of their own. So that's the thing. If you gave these guys elite receiving talent like Burrow's played with, would that help their production even a little bit more? I tend to lean on the side of yes, even accounting for the offensive line drop-off that you do have in Cincinnati. But that's the thing. He's just not as special an all-time offensive engine as my top 3. That's the only thing that I can say about Burrow. And why I don't have him higher, because inside the pocket with his physical traits, I mean, the guy's maxed out everything that he could possibly be. And he is an all-time great. I think all these top 4 guys, they're all-time greats at the position. Who's in your number 3 spot, Logan?
So I know that a lot of people will order these guys. However, a lot of people would have this guy as their number 1 quarterback, and a lot of people think it is frankly disrespectful that this guy is not the number 1 quarterback consensus in the NFL. I have Lamar Jackson, and it's hard not to be blown away by the raw numbers for Lamar. I get it. 5,087 total yards passing and rushing last season, 915 on the ground, nearly 1,000, 45 total touchdowns to 9 total turnovers. And I would never argue against Lamar's effectiveness as a regular season offensive engine. He's always been, I mean, since the day he came into me, the best rushing threat at the quarterback position ever. Top 3 rushing attack every season for Baltimore. 4 times they've been the number 1 rushing attack in football since he entered the league. That's historic stuff. And he is drastically improved as a passer. Last season was the best passing year of his career. I think it's no coincidence, too, that you've got a guy like Zay Flowers, who was the best threat he's ever had in the receiving room, too, right? Like, Lamar has never been better as a dual-threat quarterback. I do think you have to look at the playoff shortcomings when you talk about Lamar, though. And I'm not even going to criticize him for this last season. I don't know what the hell else he could have done. Mark Andrews dropped the 2-point conversion that could have potentially forced overtime versus Buffalo. And I think a lot of people just pencil in the fact that they were going to go win that game or something like that. Like, Buffalo still had time on the clock. Josh Wooden had an opportunity to win that game. Like, I think a lot of people just kind of conveniently go, oh, Baltimore would have won that game, right?
Well, that's complete insanity because they were playing for the tie.
Yeah, exactly.
They trailed the entire game, and then Josh was going to get the ball with, 2.5 minutes and all their timeouts.
I think it was like a minute and a half maybe. There wasn't a ton of time, but I do think people conveniently just go, okay, Baltimore would have won that game and done something.
Yeah,
that being said, like
a minute 33.
Lamar put them in position. You know, he did everything he could in that game. And that's not the only game that happened in. Mark Andrews, off the top of my head, I want to say has 2 or 3 other instances in his career were just bad clutch drops. We're just like, bro, what are you doing? So I'm not even going to get on Lamar for what he did last season. He drubbed the Steelers, like we all knew was going to happen. And then he played the Bills basically as good as you could have had. Like, without winning, Josh outplayed him.
That's very interesting to me that you're saying that, because I think that what he did in terms of the comeback effort was really good. I also think he was the reason they had to come back, because he had 2 terrible, very costly turnovers before that. I think Lamar played a fine game, but I think he played below his standards because he's that good. And I think those
agree.
2 mistakes were very costly in that game.
And I just mean circumstantial at the end of the game. He got them within striking distance. He did his job. He got them there. He would have tied the game up. Like, even though he had the turnovers, I have been the guy that has been overly critical of Lamar in his playoffs. And I do want to just give him props that he dug them that hole, but he got them back. And because I've been overly critical, I do want to show him some love. That being said, I still do remember Lamar playing well below his standard. Not only early on in that game, he put up 10 points in the 23 title game against Kansas City. That is ingrained in my brain, and I don't just think we can wash away that. And here's another thing. I know we've talked about this, and we're an hour and a half deep into it. When we're talking about the top 3 guys, I am going to bring up playoffs because we have a decent sample size for all of these guys, and I think we can glean a lot. And I think Lamar's skill set translates to the playoffs. I don't think even he's come so far as a passer. I don't even really have any gripes about his skill set or his ability to do it on a big stage. It's just that he hasn't. And so I am going to hold the fact that he only put 10 points up against Kansas City against him. He is 3-5 overall in the playoffs. He has 13 TDs to 11 turnovers. And so when we're talking about Lamar Jackson against, in my opinion, the 2 greatest playoff performing quarterbacks in NFL history in Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, that is where I'm going to hold it against him. That being said, Lamar Jackson is 1 ring away from being cemented as an all-time great quarterback in NFL history. He is one of the most talented quarterbacks ever. I think he is cemented. With another great season, I think Lamar's probably cemented as a top 10 quarterback ever. And if he gets that ring, he is going to be arguable as a top 5 quarterback ever. I realize that. He's that great as an offensive engine. He's got to show it to me more consistently in the playoffs, because Josh, as criticized as he has been, he's probably the most overly criticized quarterback ever. People called him overrated. Josh has proven it every year, damn near, in the playoffs. Lamar hasn't. That's the difference to me between those 2 guys.
Yeah. Lamar is one of the greatest offensive engines in the regular season we've ever seen in the history of the sport. It's unbelievable. His ability to elevate supporting casts, like I talk about in 2023, where he is just such a ridiculous dual threat. He's going to make you probably the best rushing attack in football, and he's going to make you a really efficient passing attack because the threat of the run is that ever present. And that's arguably the craziest thing about Lamar's last season. You mentioned all the ridiculous raw production. He also led the league in yards per pass attempt with 8.8 and yards per rush attempt with 6.6. So we've never seen a dual threat like him. He's taken a leap as a passer. He's the greatest rushing quarterback we've ever seen. And playing with Derrick Henry just unlocks maybe the most explosive backfield we've ever seen and puts together, in my opinion, the greatest rushing attack we've ever seen, where you have 2 all-time great rushing threats who can play off of each other at such a high level. And now Lamar's an elite passer too. He's incredible. He's locked in my top 3 for those reasons. But you basically said it, man. I mean, when it comes down to it, I just still trust Josh and Pat more as processors and throwers of the football in the playoffs. You have the 10 points in 2023 versus Kansas City. You have Lamar responding well, but still having 2 costly turnovers against the Bills last year. You mentioned the bottom line playoff numbers, 13 touchdowns, 11 turnovers. I wouldn't consider anybody else above Lamar. Not even Burrow, as great as he is. Just because the creation that you get with Lamar is so valuable and so unique in the history of this sport, it's just up against the ridiculous playoff production of Josh and Pat that I have to keep him down at number 3. And it is ridiculous. You say 2 greatest playoff performers ever. I think on a per game basis, Pat is the best playoff performer we've seen. I would still have to, out of deference to their entire body of work, have Brady and Montana in the top 3.
I think Warner's arguable as well if you wanted to make a case.
Yeah, Warner's got incredible playoff numbers, but statistically, Josh Allen is number one in so many significant quarterback categories and is top 5 in every single one. So I know that people will shudder at that claim. And even for me, I couldn't say that he's a top 2 playoff performer, period, point blank. But on a per game basis, doing his job, yeah, he's been basically as good as anybody we've ever seen. And Lamar has not been close. I mean, Lamar has played well below his standard. And even if you think that trend is going to change, and I hope it does, and I think last year was progress, even though it ultimately wasn't regular season Lamar, it was better than playoff shortcomings of years past. The playoff resume from both Pat and Josh is just too great. When also, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, I don't think we should really have to argue for. I know the regular season numbers the last couple of years aren't as insane, but Josh's regular seasons are that insane. He is also with Lamar as a top tier regular season offensive engine we've ever seen. And then the playoff resume is just much better.
No, well said. I mean, let's get into it. I've got Josh at my number 2 spot. Carson and I have said this, I feel like, for a year now, but it's really 1A and 1B to me with Mahomes and Josh. Like, I think Josh has closed the gap between the two. I still prefer Pat. I'll get into why in a minute. It's basically his aura. That's the argument I'm going to make. I think his aura just overwhelms everyone, but Josh is that kind of elite regular season offensive engine, one of the greatest all time. Since 2020, when Josh really took the leap, 3 times they have been the number 2 offense by points per game. The other 2 years, they were the number 3 and number 6 offense. 3 times he has let out the number 1 third down offense. The other 2 years, they've been number 3 and number 7. And in the playoffs, I mentioned these numbers earlier, he's number 1 in total yards by quarterbacks per playoff game. He is number 1 in fewest turnovers per game by a quarterback in NFL playoff history, minimum 10 games played, and he's number 3 in total touchdowns per playoff game by a quarterback. It's like...
And he's number 1 in touchdown to turnover ratio, 33-6.
The fuck do you want the guy to do, man? I mean, I don't even know any new shit we can say about Josh because we've been glazing Josh for so long, Carson, in fighting this good fight, but I do feel vindicated. He was in Tua conversations, man. They called him the most overrated player in the league. Like, I pray that we're beyond that and that we have grown as a society. I just can't believe how far we've come from a year ago, man. Like, the conversations Josh was in was ridiculous to me. I don't know what else the guy's got to do to prove himself. Like, the numbers are all there, man. You can go look at them. Like, it's not like an outlier. That's what blows my mind about Josh, man, is he's been doing this consistently for 5 years now. Like, and I really don't. That's the big thing to me too, dude. If you have Josh number 1, I don't care, man. You can argue it. Like, the case is all laid out. It's all there. And, yeah, I think Josh is the freaking man. I think he's proven it. I don't think that you can look at the tape. You can look at all the numbers, man. They all back it up.
I have Josh Allen at number 1. And it really is a 1A, 1B situation for me. From 2020 to 2023, every single year, every single moment was consistent. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. Josh Allen is the second best quarterback in football. And then this past year, I think that Josh took something of a leap. And I think that he asserted himself as absolutely on the same level as Pat. And in my opinion, just slightly the guy who I would rather have. But you mentioned it, dude. I mean, it is ridiculous the last 5 years. Since 2020, the Bills are by far the number 1 scoring offense in football, over 29 points per game. Nobody else is at 27 or higher. In that time, 5 years, Josh Allen has averaged 4,855 total yards and 43 touchdowns per season. There are 10 players in NFL history who have a single season hitting those marks. Josh has averaged it for a half decade. So he has been, for 5 years, this all-time great offensive engine, this all-time great dual threat, this all-time great third down, fourth down, red zone quarterback, all-time great arm talent, maybe the greatest physical freak we've ever seen at the position. And then this past season was his greatest yet because he maintained that status as all-time top-tier offensive engine and creator while also taking the fewest negative plays in the NFL over an entire season. This guy took 14 sacks and had 8 total turnovers while he's giving you 4,300 yards, 40 touchdowns, and he didn't even play as many snaps as other guys because the Bills were destroying so many teams. But his ability to still give you this A++ creation, crazy freak outlier stuff with his legs and his arm, and then not get any of the bad stuff, limit that stuff at a better level than anybody else. It's unbelievable. Like, we've never seen somebody meet that threshold of volume creation with so few negative plays. And he led an all-time offense. Like, before everybody sat in week 18, he had the Bills as one of 6 offenses this century to average 3 points per drive in a season, despite the fact that, as much as I love him, Khalil Shakir was his wide receiver 1. This was the year that everybody predicted, oh, the Bills are vulnerable. The Bills are going to not once again win the AFC East. And then they go out there, they're 13-3 when Josh plays. They come to the brink of a Super Bowl. Like I said, man, the third down numbers that you read off, ridiculous. The red zone numbers are consistently phenomenal. The fourth down numbers are consistently phenomenal because in short yardage, man, I mean, he is just an all-time handful to deal with. He's so great situationally, and I think he has just become an absolute master at handling and overcoming pressure. I think that's maybe where, he's reached his absolute apex, where the criticism of Josh early in his career was, oh, he tries to do too much. He tries to do too much. And you got so much great stuff with that superhero ability he had, but you also got some more turnovers. You got some more negative plays. And now you're still getting the superhero stuff, maybe scaled back a little bit, but with the benefit of dominating the possession game, right? Having that perfect balance. Last 2 years, he's top 3 in EPA per dropback under pressure both years. Mahomes has been 24th and 12th over those 2 seasons. So I think that that's an area where Josh has had an edge, that ability to deliver under pressure. He's just maybe the greatest physical talent we've ever seen, who's also seeing the game at such a high level intellectually. So I do slightly prefer him to Mahomes. I think that he is creating more offense. I think he's making fewer mistakes. He's leading significantly better team offenses out there without high-end receiver talent. And the argument against him is the playoffs, right? Like, basically the entire Mahomes argument is going to rest on he's the best playoff performer we've ever seen, and I trust him more in that situation, which I do get, because Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs is as inevitable as anybody in sports that we've seen, right? Averages 277 passing yards per game, 105 passer rating, 46 touchdowns to 10 picks, and a 17-4 record. It's unbelievable. It's an incredible resume. But that really is the argument for Pat right now, right? Like, the whole argument is reputation, playoff resume. Okay, he beat Josh by a field goal in the playoffs. The Chiefs beat the Bills these last 2 years. But I think that if that's what your whole argument is resting on, you have to acknowledge Pat left the door open with the Super Bowl performance, which I think, again, a lot of people have held against him too much. I think that Pat played badly in that game. I also think he was under a ridiculous amount of pressure. And so that doesn't cause me to do some referendum on Patrick Mahomes. That doesn't make me say, oh my God, he can never be the GOAT, because that's ridiculous. And if you think that, you've forgotten about Brady's performance in the 2007 Super Bowl. You've forgotten about Brady's performance in, I believe it was 2009 against the Ravens. He had a terrible playoff game. Like, great players have bad games. That's the reality. Nobody's impervious to that. But we were talking with some of our Chief fan friends earlier, and they're saying outright, yeah, Josh has been better for the last 2 years, but Pat's the guy you want most in the playoffs. And I still hear that case. I still get that case. But again, I think the Super Bowl struggle left the door open, because if your argument against Josh is the playoffs, then you're making an argument against the guy who is number 1 all time in playoff touchdown to turnover ratio, number 1 all time in playoff total yards per game, everything you said, who's averaged 28 points per game in the playoffs since 2020. Like, if you want to take Pat because you trust him a little bit more in the playoffs, that's fine with me. But if you act like it's not a conversation, I think that's ridiculous. And Josh is the better regular season quarterback at this point. I just think he's shown a greater ability with his raw physical tools, with his rushing threat. And by the way, this goes for Lamar too. I think those are the 2 best regular season quarterbacks in football now. The thing is, Josh has also still been so great in the playoffs that I can't knock him down for that, because so much goes into these playoff games, man. And they've been so fucking close. But like, so much of it has come down to which defense can win at the line of scrimmage, which defense can get pressure. You look at the differences in pressure rates, it's massive. The Chiefs defense has stepped up in a big way. The Bills defense hasn't. It comes down to a 4th and short call, which I thought Josh got, and the officials rule he didn't. Like, those things for me are not going to override the fact that I think Josh was the best quarterback in football this year. And I still think I'm extremely high on Patrick Mahomes. I think that Patrick Mahomes 2022, that's the highest quarterback peak we've ever seen in the history of this sport. And I think he is on a very potential GOAT trajectory. But the reality is, in Brady's prime years, there were seasons where Peyton was better, where Rodgers was better, and they were correctly viewed as such. Being the GOAT doesn't mean you're the best every single year when you're going up against all-time great contemporaries, and that's where we're at with Josh versus Pat right now, in my opinion. I'm totally fine with anybody having Pat number 1. I'm fine with you having him number 1. I really considered it myself. I really, really did, but I'm going to lean on Josh.
I mean, I respect the balls of the take. The only other component I think a lot of people, you were talking about the argument that people would have for Mahomes versus Josh. I think the other one would be the turnover point, but it's kind of like I mentioned earlier with Baker Mayfield. Like, the guys with the 2 quarterbacks with the most turnovers since 2020, since Josh really broke onto the scene, number 1 is Josh Allen. Number 2 is Patrick Mahomes. It's like,
I also think that point to me is moot now, man. Like,
I think it
he
can get a little bit.
had the fewest negative plays we've ever seen from a quarterback producing with that volume. And in the playoffs, we've seen this over a number of years, 33 touchdowns to 6 turnovers. I've talked about this so much over the years, but I have always felt that when you get Josh in a high-stakes moment, he locks the fuck in and he takes care of the football, because we just have seen it in the playoffs so many times where he's been at his absolute best. But this year, it wasn't, okay, he locked in and did it for 2 games in the playoffs. He did it every single week, end to end. So, as somebody who watches every single snap of Bills football, I think Josh is one of the absolute best at taking care of the ball. And I don't think that's an argument in Pat's favor anymore. And that's a big reason that I think it's gone from 1 and 2 to 1A, 1B in whatever order.
Well, I agree with that. I think they're like even there now. I think that they're on similar levels. I think that Josh has.
I think in the playoffs, they're both ridiculously good at taking care of the football. Because Pat, similarly, he has regular seasons where he'll have 13, 14 picks, whatever. But in the playoffs, the guy doesn't turn the ball over.
I do have Pat number 1. And I think we can kind of take Patrick Mahomes' greatness for granted sometimes. It's his thing. Where it's like, you know, we talk about this with like Giannis and like LeBron, and like you can just become numb to it. It's like you just pencil him in every year. Like the Chiefs went 15-1 last season, made it to the Super Bowl, and they lost. We're on the verge of a three-peat, and a lot of people looked at that as like a down year for Kansas City because they didn't just mow over everybody and win the Super Bowl. That to me speaks to your greatness more than anything else, is the fact that that's the standard. That is the bar for Patrick Mahomes at this point in his career. If he doesn't win the Super Bowl, it's a letdown. Like, that's kind of my take. And I said it jokingly that the reason that I say it slightly jokingly, that the reason I have Pat over Josh is his aura. But it's kind of true. I call him the Grim Reaper. There have been 2 quarterbacks in my life that I have watched that leave me with this pit in my stomach every time I watch them, that I always have this sense of impending doom if they have the ball in their hands. It's Tom Brady and it's Patrick Mahomes. It's a feeling. And that is my justification for Mahomes over Josh, because I think you make a great analytical and statistical argument for Josh Allen. Mahomes scares me. Mahomes leaves me with a helpless feeling when he has the ball in his hands, that if there is time on the clock and if the Chiefs have the ball, Patrick Mahomes is going to walk in and he's going to take my lunch money and he's going to break my heart. And that's ultimately why Mahomes is number 2 in touchdowns per playoff game by a quarterback. He's just behind Kurt Warner. He's 3rd in total yards per playoff game by a quarterback. And he's 3rd in fewest turnovers per playoff game by a quarterback. At this stage in his career, Mahomes has yet to turn 30. He's second in most playoff touchdowns by a quarterback in NFL history, and in his 7 seasons in the playoffs, has led the playoffs in touchdowns 5 of those times. So, that's it, man. I don't know, Carson. I think Mahomes is like cemented to me, dude, as the number 1 quarterback. And I normally have my opinions as fluid. Pat would have to have a really down year for me, and I think Josh would have to have another MVP season, or Pat would have to have a bad playoff game where he's super flustered by pressure again, and Josh would have to dominate again in the playoffs. And I can't rule that out from happening. If that does happen, I'll do it. But I said it all through the playoffs last year, man. I would never pick against Patrick Mahomes in an individual game, and I still kind of believe that, man. Like, Mahomes scares me more than any other quarterback in NFL history, and I guess it's fear, man. I guess that's what does it for me. That's the reason that Mahomes is still number 1.
I get it, and I think that is the argument, and I don't think that is some, like, amorphous, imaginary quality. It's like, no, man, he gets into the playoffs, he plays at a ridiculously all-time high level, regardless of the regular season numbers. He did it in 2023, and yes, the Super Bowl was really bad this past year, but overall, his playoff level has been as consistently as high as anybody we've ever seen. And throughout the regular season, like, yeah, the Chiefs were a weird 15-1 before they sat everybody, right? Because, like, they had the lowest point differential ever for a team to be up there. They won 11 one-score games, all that shit. You're like, okay, can that be replicated? Patrick Mahomes had 7 game-winning drives. Patrick Mahomes had 5 fourth-quarter comebacks. Like, this is what he does. He does have that Grim Reaper feel to him. But that's where I do want to reiterate, because I do think that a lot of the Mahomes case is the totality of what he's accomplished, right? Which I would never for a second question, never, ever would I argue over the last 5 years, over the last 7 years, Josh Allen has been better than Patrick Mahomes. No, I really don't think that's a conversation whatsoever. What I'm saying is, in this very moment, I think Josh has improved in a way that would be more appreciated at this very moment if Dalton Kincaid made a catch. You can call it a difficult catch. I think it's a catch that he should have made on 4th down, because I do think that people can be so glued to a head-to-head and can be so glued to a small sample size in a single moment. I mean, there's just so many factors at play, and I think Josh was better last year than Pat. I'm comfortable saying that.
The Bills, playoffs included, had 13 games scoring more than 30 points. The Chiefs did it 3 times.
Right, and that's where I think regular season is just not a conversation anymore, even though I think Pat's regular seasons have been underrated the last 2 years. I do, because people put up his stats on a graphic next to Bo Nix, and they say, who do you want? And it's like, okay, man, well, the offensive line has been mediocre. The receiving core has been below average. All of that is true. I still thought that because of what he did in clutch situations last year, Mahomes was a top 5 MVP candidate, but he's not making the MVP case. He's not single-handedly propelling you to being an elite offense. And again, Josh has the benefit of having a significantly better offensive line for sure, but he still doesn't have dynamic receiving talent, and he can just physically do that insane stuff week after week after week at a ridiculous all-time level.
It's not a ridiculous take, and it's not ridiculous to say this anymore, man. And I'm tired of pretending it's not, you know?
Yeah.
I think people are going to take issue with it, but I respect it, man, and I don't think it's a ridiculous take. I think Josh is right there with him, and I commend you, man. I think he has been the better regular season quarterback. And with the numbers thing, I just want to mention, too, the Chiefs just win games in different ways. Like, the Chiefs run the ball a lot, and it's not very effective. They try to play a ball-controlled defensive style of football. Like, they just play it in a different way. So I don't think Pat's numbers are going to reflect it, but it's like you said, man, all those game-winning drives. Pat's always got his sling blade ready, man, and he's sharpening it all game. He's waiting for crunch time, and
yeah,
he's going to get you. It's ballsy. I respect the hell out of it, man. I like the take.
I think the top 3 are that great you can argue any of them, even though Lamar's playoff resume is, again,
it's imminent. Lamar feels like one of those guys that he's going to break through one year, man.
That's what I think. I think him and Josh both.
Josh
and Josh
both.
has been
I
more
agree.
consistent, but I think they're both so special that there's going to be a run where it's just like, oh, yeah, the same thing that makes Lamar unstoppable for 17 games is going to come through for a 3 or 4 game playoff run. But again, it's just Josh has been more consistent with it. And so I believe in him just a little bit more there. And I do think he has the playoff regular season resume combo to put him as the top dog right now. He's absolutely ridiculous. And God, I'm so madly in love with him. And I cannot wait to watch him play football again, dude. I'm so excited for this season. And it'll be interesting to see how all of these guys make their cases this year. Because last year, one of the great quarterback seasons we've ever seen. I mean, from all of these big four, again, Pat doesn't have the regular season, but the other three all had like all-time regular seasons in their own ways. And then Pat also still got to the Super Bowl and won 15 games. Let me ask you this, Logan, before we get out of here. Who is the guy who isn't on your list right now who you think is most likely to be on it by the end of this coming season? I've got an answer if you want a little time.
Yeah, let me chew on this one.
I'm taking Drake May. And he's not even an honorable mention for me right now just because, like I said, I'm not doing projecting when I'm ranking this list, but I think Drake May is nasty, man. I think he's creative. I think he's got a ridiculous arm. I think he can really move. I love him. And the thing for him is going to be the situation is still probably not good enough for him to have top 10 kind of numbers. I mean, the offensive line is still really bad. Probably slightly improved from last year, but still really bad. You bring in Stephon Diggs. We'll see how impactful he is in the receiving game. I do think the Patriots are going to win a fair number of games because of their schedule and because I believe in May that much. So I'm really high on him. He's probably the guy who I look at this coming season. But we'll see. The numbers maybe won't fully support that case just because I think his rookie numbers don't actually reflect how impressive he was in the worst situation in football for a quarterback.
Dak, I think, and Jordan Love are like no-brainer answers. Like, I just want to kind of get those out of the way. Drake's a good shout. I think Drake is probably more likely than Caleb. I feel like there are more things that Caleb needs to refine.
Drake was closer this past year than Caleb.
Agreed. I like Caleb's tools more still. Like, I think we're just looking at, like, arm talent and all that. But Drake, to me, is more ready right now to take that kind of leap. I'm buying low. This is so I would probably say if I was going to pick outside of those guys, I think Drake May is probably the guy. I'm buying low on this guy now, and this is not at the end of this year, but I think give me 3 to 4 years. I think Shedeur Sanders could be here, man. I'm in on Shedeur, man. I really like what we've seen from him in the preseason, and I think some of the character stuff can kind of get. I think even I blew it. He is really talented. He's really composed behind the line of scrimmage, and I like his creation. I was really impressed with his mobility and his ability to create out of structure. It's a preseason game. I don't want to take too much away from it, but and I like the way the Browns rally behind him. I think the team believes in him, and I'm not in the locker room, so it's like, why would I think Shedeur can be a good leader. So I think in a few years, I think he could be the Browns franchise guy, and I'm rooting for him, man. So I've been impressed. I think in a couple of years, he could be on this list.
Shedeur over Cam Ward?
I think Shedeur's situation, as sad as it sounds, is probably still even better than Cam's. I really don't.
What would you take long term if you're betting?
I'd still take Cam
in that class.
But Shedeur's 2 for sure, and I think Shedeur's. I think Shedeur and Cam both could be top 10 QBs.
The one guy who I really should shout out who's probably actually most likely is C.J. Stroud. May is more of a dark horse. I guess he's more of the fun pick to be on this top 10 by the end of next year, but I think C.J. has a more legitimate chance because I think he's already played at a top 10 quarterback level and is just very, very close and very arguably already is at that status. Football season is just around the corner, Logan. Can't wait. So we are going to have a whole bunch of preview content coming up. But, of course, we've still got our NBA stuff. We've still got rankings to finish, Logan. We've still got conversations to have, historic and current. We've still got lots of trivia coming down the pike. So it's a wonderful time of the year over here at Nerd Sesh. And we hope that you guys are enjoying it with us. If you are, there's plenty more of our content. You know where to find it, all across our YouTube channel. You can find all of our good stuff Also, definitely, I'm looking to come out with a couple of video breakdowns over the next couple weeks. We haven't had any of those yet over summer, but stay tuned in for some of those. And yeah, you can follow us across social, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. See all of our trivia content, all the clips from the show, all the graphics from the show, and we do all these rankings. And of course, you can always join our Discord if you want to become part of our community there and chat with the gang. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.